These colloquies and answers of the holy angels somewhat gladdened and consolated their queen and mistress, since they confirmed her in her own interior conviction that these sweet asides would excite the special love and delight of the Most High. They would not speak more openly, because the Lord, on his own account, wished to prolong these delights. Proverbs 8:31. Although her most holy Son, on account of his natural love toward his mother, a mother only, not having any father, was often deeply touched with compassion at seeing her so afflicted, yet he would not show any signs thereof, hiding his compassion under a severe countenance. Sometimes, when the most loving mother called him to his meals, he would delay. At other times he would partake of them without looking at her or speaking to her. But although the great lady at such times shed many tears and lovingly sighed in her heart, she always put upon herself such restraint, and weighed all her actions so wisely, that if it were possible for God to give way to wonder, which he certainly cannot, he would have yielded to such a feeling in the presence of such plenitude of holiness and perfection in this mere creature. In as far as he was man, the child Jesus delighted especially in seeing his divine love and grace bring forth such abundant fruits in his virgin mother. The holy angels sang to him new hymns of praise for this admirable and unheard-of prodigy of virtues. Upon the request of the loving mother, St. Joseph had made a couch which she covered with a single blanket, and upon which the child Jesus rested and took his sleep. For from the time in which he had left the cradle, when they were yet in Egypt, he would not accept of any other bed or of more covering, although he did not stretch himself out on this couch, nor even always made use of it. He sometimes reclined in a sitting posture upon it, resting upon a poor pillow made of wood by the same lady. When she spoke of preparing for him a better resting place, her most holy Son answered that the only couch upon which he was to be stretched out was that of his cross, in order to teach men by his example. 1 Peter 2:21. That no one can enter eternal rest by things beloved of Babylon, and that to suffer is our true relief in mortal life. Thenceforward the heavenly lady imitated him in this manner of taking rest with new earnestness and attention. When at night the time for repose had come, the mistress of humility had been accustomed to prostrate herself before her son as he reclined on his couch, asking his pardon for not having fulfilled all her duty in serving him, and for not having been sufficiently grateful for the blessings of the day. She poured out her thanks anew, with many tears, acknowledged him as true God and Redeemer of the world, and she would not rise from the ground until her son commanded her and gave her his blessing. This same behavior she observed also in the morning, requesting her divine teacher and master to impose upon her all that she was to do during the day in his service, which Jesus did with tokens of great love. But now he changed his bearing and manner toward her. When the most innocent mother approached to reverence and adore him as she was wont, although her tears and sighs issued ever more abundantly from her inmost heart, he would not answer her a word, but listened to her unmoved, commanding her to betake herself away. To see her son, the true God and man, so different in his behavior and so distant in his action, so sparing of words, and in all his exterior bearing so changed, ineffably affected the purest and dove-like heart of the loving mother. The heavenly lady examined her interior, searched all the conditions, circumstances, and sequence of her actions, and racked her memory in her inquiry into the celestial workings of her soul and faculties. Although she could find no shadow of darkness, where all was light, holiness, purity, and grace, yet since she knew, as Job says, that neither the heavens nor the stars are pure in the eyes of God, Job 15:15, and since he finds fault even in the angelic spirits, Job 25:5, the great queen feared lest she should have overlooked some defect which was known to the Lord. In this anxiety, she, though filled with supreme wisdom, suffered agonies of love. For her, being strong as death, Canticles 8:6, caused in her an emulation enkindled by an unquenchable fire of suffering and tribulation. This trial of our queen lasted many days, during which her most holy Son looked upon her with incomparable pleasure, by which he raised her to the position of a teacher of all the creatures. He rewarded her loyalty and exquisite love with abundant graces in addition to those which she already possessed. Then happened what I shall relate in the following chapter. Instruction vouchsafed by Mary, the most holy Queen of Heaven. My daughter, I see that thou art desirous of being a disciple of my most holy Son, since now thou hast understood and described my own behavior in his regard. For thy consolation, take notice that he has exercised this office of teacher not only once and not only at the time when he taught his holy doctrine, yet while yet in mortal flesh, as is related in the Gospels, Matthew 28:20, but that he continues to be the teacher of souls to the end of the world. He admonishes, instructs, and inspires them, urging them to put in practice whatever is most perfect and most holy. Thus he acts toward all without exception, although according to his divine ordainment, and according to the disposition and attentiveness of each soul, everyone receives more or less of the benefits. Matthew 11:5. If thou hadst always applied this truth, thou wouldst have known by abundant experience that the Lord does not refuse to act as the teacher of the poor, of the despised, and of the sinners, if they wish to listen to his secret doctrines. As thou now desirest to know what disposition he requires of thee in order to have him teach thee in thy heart's content, I shall in his name inform thee of it. I assure thee that if he shall find thee well disposed, he will, as a true and wise teacher, communicate to thee the plenitude of his wisdom and enlightenment. First of all, thou must keep thy conscience pure, undefiled, serene, and quiet, keeping a constant watch against falling into any sin or imperfection throughout all the events of this life. At the same time, thou must withdraw thyself and disentangle thyself from all that is earthly, so much so that, as I have already formerly admonished thee, thou do not retain any image or memory of human or visible things, but maintain the utmost sincerity, purity, and serenity of heart. When thou thus hast cleared thy interior from the images and shadows of earthly things, then thou wilt pay attention to the voice of thy God like a beloved daughter, forgetting the voice of Babylon, the house of her father Adam, and all the aftertastes of sin. I assure thee that he will speak to thee words of eternal life. John 6:69. It will be thy duty to listen to him with reverence and humble gratitude, to appreciate his teachings, and to follow them in practice with all diligence and punctuality. Nothing can be hid from this great master and teacher, Hebrews 4:13, and he withdraws in disgust from those who are ungrateful and disobedient. No one must think that these withdrawals of the Most High always happen in the same way as they happen to me, for the Lord withdrew from me, not on account of any fault of mine, but out of exceeding love. He is accustomed to withdraw from other creatures in order to visit them with merited punishment for their many sins, outrages, ingratitudes, and negligences. Therefore, my daughter, engaging thy reverence and esteem for the teaching and enlightenment of thy divine Master, and for my own exhortations, thou must take into account thy omissions and faults. Moderate thy inordinate fears, and do not any more doubt that it is the Lord who speaks to thee and teaches thee, since his doctrine of itself gives testimony of its own truth and assures thee that God is its author. For thou seest that it is holy, pure, perfect, and without error. It inculcates whatever is best and reprehends thy least fault, and is moreover approved by thy instructors and spiritual directors. As I am thy teacher, I wish that thou also, in imitation of me, come every morning and night humbly and sorrowfully to confess thy faults, in order that I may intercede for thee, and as thy mother obtain for thee pardon of the Lord. As soon as thou committest any imperfection, acknowledge it without delay, and ask the Lord pardon, promising to amend. If thou attend to these things which I here tell thee, thou wilt be a disciple of the Most High, and of me as thou desirest to be. Purity of soul and the divine grace is the most exquisite and adequate preparation for partaking of the influences of divine light and science, and the Redeemer of the world communicates it to his true disciples. The operations of the soul of her most holy Son, and all that had been hidden to her again becomes visible to most holy Mary. She is instructed in the law of grace. Human ingenuity has made long and copious inquisitions into the nature and properties of love and into its cause and effects. In order to explain the holy and divine love of our blessed Mother, I was compelled to add much to all that has been written and said concerning love. For with the exception of the love existing in the soul of Christ our Redeemer, there was none in all the human creatures which was equal to that possessed by that heavenly lady, who merited the name of beautiful love. Ecclesiastes 24:24. The object and end of holy love is the same in all, namely God in himself and all the other creatures for his sake, but the subject in which it exists, the source from which it flows, the effects which it produces are widely different. Now, in our great Queen, all these elements of love attain their highest perfection: purity of heart, faith, hope, filial and holy fear, knowledge and wisdom, remembrance and gratitude for the greatest benefits, and all the other sources of a most exalted love were hers in boundless affluence and proportion. The flame of her love was not enkindled or inflamed by the foolishness of the senses, which are without the guide and control of reason. Her holy and pure love entered by way of her most exalted understanding of the infinite goodness and ineffable sweetness of God. For since God is wisdom and goodness, he wishes to be loved not only with sweetness, but also with wisdom and knowledge of the one that loves. These loving affections are more alike to themselves in their effects than in their causes, for if they once take possession and subject to themselves the heart, they are hard to expel. From this fact arises the suffering of the human heart in seeing itself forsaken and unnoticed by the one beloved, for this want of proper correspondence implies the obligation of rooting out its own love. As this love has taken such entire possession of the heart that it dreads a dispossession, although on the other hand reason urges it, such a violent strife is caused as will resemble the agony of death. In the blind and worldly love this agony is but frenzy and madness, but in divine love this agony is highest wisdom. For since no reason can be found for expelling love, it is the height of prudence to search after means of loving more ardently and seeking to please the beloved more zealously. As also the will therein enacts with fullest liberty, it happens that the more freely it loves the highest good, so much the more does it lose the power of not loving him. In this glorious strife, the will, being the master and sovereign of the soul, becomes happily the slave of its love. It neither seeks nor is it able to deny itself this free servitude. On account of this free violence, if the soul finds avoidance or withdrawal of the highest good which it loves, it suffers the pains and agonies of death, in the same manner as if its life were ebbing away. The soul's whole life is in its love and in the knowledge that it is loved. Hence one can understand a little of the sufferings of the most ardent and pure heart of our Queen in the absence of the Lord and in the eclipse of the light of his love. It caused in her agonies of doubt whether perhaps she had not displeased him, for as she was so to say a vast abyss of humility and love, and as she knew not whence the austerity and reserve of her beloved originated, she suffered a martyrdom so entrancing and yet so severe as no human or angelic powers will ever be able to fathom. Mary, who is the mother of the most holy love, Ecclesiastes 24:24, and who reached the pinnacle of created perfection, alone knew how was able to bear this martyrdom, and in it she exceeded all the sufferings of all the martyrs and the penances of all the confessors added together. In her was fulfilled what is said in the Canticles, quote, "If a man should give all the substance of his house for love, he shall despise it as nothing," unquote. Canticles 8:7. For in it she forgot all the visible and created things in her own life, accounting it all for naught until she again found the grace and love of her most holy and divine Son, whom she feared to have lost, although she continued to possess him. No words can equal her care and solicitude, her watchfulness and diligence in trying to please her sweetest Son and the Eternal Father. 30 days passed in this conflict, and they equaled many ages in the estimation of her who deemed it impossible to live even one moment without the love and without the beloved of her soul. After such delay, according to our way of speaking, the heart of the child Jesus could no longer contain itself or resist further the immense force of his love for his sweetest mother, for also the Lord suffered a delightful and wonderful violence in thus holding her in such a suspense and affliction. It happened that the humble and sovereign Queen one day approached her Son Jesus, and throwing herself at his feet, with tears and sighs coming from her inmost heart, spoke to him as follows, quote, "My sweetest love and highest good, of what account am I, the insignificant dust and ashes before thy vast power? What is the misery of a creature in comparison with thy endless affluence? In all things thou excellest our lowliness, and thy immense sea of mercy overwhelms our imperfections and defects. If I have not been zealous in serving thee, as I am constrained to confess, do thou chastise my negligence and pardon it. But let me, my Son and Lord, see the gladness of thy countenance, which is my salvation, and the wished-for light of my life and being. Here at thy feet I lay my poverty, mingling it with the dust, and I shall not rise from it until I can again look into the mirror which reflects my soul." Unquote. These and other pleadings, full of wisdom and most ardent love, the great Queen poured humbly forth before her most holy Son. And as his longings to restore her to his delights were even greater than those of the Blessed Lady, he pronounced with great sweetness these few words, quote, "My mother, arise." As these words were pronounced by him, who is himself the Word of the Eternal Father, it had such an effect that the Heavenly Mother was instantly transformed and elevated into a most exalted ecstasy, in which she saw the divinity by an abstractive vision. In it the Lord received her with sweetest welcome and embraces of a father and spouse, changing her tears into rejoicing, her sufferings into delight, and her bitterness into highest sweetness. The Lord manifested to her great secrets of the scope of his new evangelical law. Wishing to write it entirely into her purest heart, the Most Holy Trinity appointed and destined her as his firstborn daughter and the first disciple of the incarnate Word, and set her up as the model and pattern for all the holy apostles, martyrs, doctors, confessors, virgins, and other just of the new church and of the law of grace, which the incarnate Word was to establish for the redemption of man. To this mystery must be referred all that the Heavenly Lady says of herself, and which the Holy Church applies to her in the 24th chapter of Ecclesiasticus, under the figure of divine wisdom. I will not detain myself in explaining it, as by proceeding to describe this mysterious event, I shall make plain what the Holy Spirit says in this chapter of our great Queen. It is sufficient to quote some of the sayings therein contained, so that all may understand something of this admirable mystery. Quote, "I came out of the mouth of the Most High," says this lady, "the firstborn before all creatures. I made that in the heavens there should arise light, and never faileth, and as a cloud I covered all the earth. I dwelt in the highest places, and my throne is in a pillar of cloud. I alone have compassed the circuit of heaven, and have penetrated into the bottom of the deep, and have walked in the waves of the sea, and have stood in all the earth, and in every people, and in every nation I have had the chief rule, and by my power I have trodden under my feet the hearts of all the high and low, and in all these I sought rest, and I shall abide in the inheritance of the Lord. Then the Creator of all things commanded and said to me, and he that made me rested in my tabernacle. And he said to me, Let thy dwelling be in Jacob, and thy inheritance in Israel, and take root in my elect. From the beginning and before the world was I created, and unto the world to come I shall not cease to be. And in the holy dwelling place I have ministered before him. And so was I established in Sion, and in the holy city likewise I rested, and my power was in Jerusalem. And I took root in an honorable people, and in the portion of my God, his inheritance, and my abode is in the full assembly of his saints." Unquote. Ecclesiastes 24, 5-16. A little further on, Ecclesiasticus continues to enumerate the excellences of Mary, saying, quote, "I have stretched out my branches as the turpentine tree, and my branches are of honor and of grace. As the vine I have brought forth a pleasant odor, and my flowers are the fruit of honor and riches. I am the mother of fair love, and of fear, and of knowledge, and of holy hope. In me is all the grace on the way, and the truth. In me is all hope of life and virtue. Come over to me, all ye that desire me, and be filled with my fruits. For my spirit is sweet above honey, and my inheritance above honey, and the honeycomb. My memory is unto everlasting generations. They that eat me shall yet hunger, and they that drink me shall yet thirst. He that hearkened to me shall not be confounded, and they that work by me shall not sin. They that shall explain me shall have life everlasting." Unquote. Ecclesiastes 24, 22-31. Let these words of Scripture suffice for pious souls, for in them they will immediately recognize such a pregnancy of mysteries and sacraments referring to Most Holy Mary, that their hearts will at once be lifted up, and they will understand and feel to what an inexplicable greatness and excellence the teaching and instruction of her Son have exalted the Sovereign Mother. By the decree of the Most Holy Trinity, this Princess of Heaven was made the true ark of the covenant of the New Testament. Apocalypse 11:19. And from the abundance of her wisdom and grace, as from an immense ocean, all sorts of blessings, which were received and shall be received by the other saints until the end of the world, have overflowed. The Heavenly Mother came out of her trance and again adored her most holy Son, asking his forgiveness for any negligence that she might have been guilty of in his service. The child Jesus, raising her up from the ground where she lay prostrate, said to her, quote, "My mother, I am much pleased with the affection of thy heart, and I wish thee to dilate it and prepare it for new tokens of my love. I will fulfill the will of my Father. Record in thy bosom the evangelical law which I came to teach to this world, and thou, mother, shalt put it in practice with the perfection desired by me." Unquote. The most pure mother responded, quote, "My Son and Lord, may I find in thy grace in thy eyes, and do thou govern my faculties in the ways of thy rectitude and pleasure. Speak, my Lord, for thy servant hears, and will follow thee unto death."